DC Studios co-president James Gunn has his work cut out for him. He's got to basically recreate a DCU from the ground up while making sure people realize this is not the DCEU and all the stuff that failed, but also taking the stuff that he liked from there and that he even created, because he did do a couple projects, into his DCU without creating confusion or crossover, while also being the writer-director of the Superman movie and apparently doing even more than that, spreading himself a bit thin these days. We've got some reporting on what James Gunn is up to on the Superman set, as well as the set of another DCU project that's ramping up basically at the same time. And this man has a lot of work ahead of him. He's got a 10-year plan, but if Superman does not work, that 10-year plan will likely never, ever come to fruition. He's got to knock this one out of the park, out the gate. And we also have him going on social media and perhaps accidentally spilling the beans on the big bad within the Superman movie as well. We're going to cover that all here today. First up, with Superman currently filming in Atlanta, James Gunn recently delivered a shock bombshell on Threads in confirming Peacemaker Season 2 had not just entered production, but he would also be directing. Superman began production in late February and is expected to shoot for 5 months, placing the wrap around late July or early August. Based on the 6 months it took to film Peacemaker Season 1, the April start of production for Season 2 should allow it to finish filming around October, with roughly a 3-month filming overlap, and Gunn is likely to eventually find himself juggling post-production on Superman and Peacemaker Season 2. Many have expressed worry that his split focus will negatively impact both projects. This comes on top of the DCU boss putting the finishing touches on the upcoming Creature Commandos animated series, which will premiere on Max this year. And I will fully admit, I thought James Gunn was probably not being very wise by directing Superman in the first place. He was going to write the movie, and then when he decided to take on directing duties, I'm going, whoa, you're supposed to be launching this shared, connected superhero universe featuring DC characters that's already failed. You got to get it up off the ground. That's a lot of irons in the fire all at the exact same time. And you're going to take the ball off of all the other projects and solely focus on Superman? And now we're finding out he's not solely focused on Superman. He's also doing what is likely a passion project. Peacemaker was very, very successful, as I understand it, on HBO Max at the time. I believe it's just Max now. And Peacemaker is a fun show. If you don't like the DC universe and you really think a superhero comedy would be fun, I think that's a great place to go. If you like the characters like Peacemaker or Vigilante and stuff like that, you might not like it because Mr. Gunn is quite irreverent with the characters in the universe and all that stuff. And he does even start taking the piss out of like the Justice League by the end of that series. But it is fun. But apparently it's also not in continuity. Like Season 2 will be a part of the DCU, but Season 1 isn't part of the DCEU. It all gets very, very confusing. And I do think James Gunn would probably do himself a world of favors by not diving so hard in the paint on the productions themselves. I understand he's a writer-director. That's where he's come from. But that's not really what his job is anymore. He's the big boss. He's the man in charge of everything. And to actually dive down into the weeds is going to make it very, very difficult to make all this stuff work all at the same time, because they do have a lot of projects that are in the early stages of production right now. Hopefully Peter Safran will be able to take care of all that, I guess, by himself. But I do understand how James Gunn feels. You know, when I was in the Air Force, I was certainly much more comfortable being a worker bee. I liked being productive. I liked being in there, in the shit with my airmen or soldiers or sailors, depending on my work environment at the time. And I liked to be working, you know, and doing the day-to-day kind of stuff. But once you make senior, it's, once you're part of like the leadership team and stuff like that, you got to go to meetings where they're telling you about who passed their PT test and who still owes their stupid annual like sexual harassment training, and, you know, who can't do this if they don't get this taken care of, and make sure that all the administrative stuff is actually happening behind the scenes as well. It sucks. I completely get it. If I was James Gunn, I would probably rather be writing and directing than going out there and making sure that all the behind-the-scenes stuff and production was being taken care of. I guess luckily for him, Peter Safran is there. He's certainly done a lot of, you know, producing and overseeing and executive producing and all that kind of stuff to maybe take some of that weight off of him. But eventually James Gunn's going to have to realize, while he is a creative person, he's not really in a creative position for the most part. He's in a very top level creative position to look at things in a very big picture scale. And now he's in there directing Peacemaker. He's directing Superman at the same time. Absolutely crazy. When asked how he will juggle his schedule between the two DCU projects, Gunn explained he only has a few days on weekends for Peacemaker, with the other directors slated to get involved in production shortly. It appears Gunn will only be taking a minor role in Peacemaker development, or at least in the early stages, but perhaps there may be room for him to get more involved and helm his episodes later in the year once Superman has wrapped production over the summer. There has arguably never been a movie as critical to a studio as Superman, which could make or break the public interest in reception of the new DCU. Peacemaker Season 2 could also be considered an incredibly necessary hit for DC Studios, as it will be the first live-action show in the new universe, as it shifts away from the DCEU setting of the freshman run. But let's be honest, once you start comparing the importance of Superman to Peacemaker Season 2, it's not even close. There's nothing more important than Superman at DC Studios. There's nothing more important than Superman for James Gunn. There's nothing more important to the healthy future and viability of the DCU as a thing than the Superman movie. He better not be taking his eye off the ball, because if this doesn't work, basically all will be lost. He will likely never get probably even to a second film, if we're being completely honest. David Zaslav and the people behind Warner Brothers Discovery have lost a lot of money. And they certainly have lost a lot of money in DCEU movies. They are betting heavily that James Gunn is going to have the secret sauce to making this thing work and really hitting it out the park. Like, there's nothing more important for anybody right now than likely James Gunn on Superman. That cannot be understated. Certainly, they would love another hit for Peacemaker. They would love Season 2 to be just as successful or even more successful than Season 1. But one of these projects has the possibility of making the studio $1 billion, in a 2 or 3 month span. And it ain't Peacemaker. One of these projects could feasibly create a franchise that brings in $20 billion at the box office over the next 10 to 15 years. And it certainly is not Peacemaker. As much as I like Peacemaker and I enjoy John Cena and I thought it was a fun show, but Superman is king right now. And I hope James Gunn realizes that, although he may have accidentally let the cat out of the bag when it comes to the big villain in the Superman movie. In a post on Threads, Superman director James Gunn revealed all the speaking roles in his DC Studios film have now been filled. Naturally, this had left many wondering who would play the lead villain for Superman, as fans were expecting that casting to still be on the way. Brainiac had widely been speculated to be the villain for Gunn's DC blockbuster, but those theories appear to have been debunked. With the news that casting is done, Superman has only announced one outright DC villain casting so far, with Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor, but most are still expecting David Corenswet's Clark Kent to go toe-to-toe with another villain who will pose more of a physical threat to Superman. Brainiac would have been really cool. I think Superman 3 with Christopher Reeves was supposed to be Brainiac, but they couldn't really bring it to fruition. And unfortunately, we've never seen Brainiac in a live-action film. And it sounds like we won't be seeing that with the Superman movie. Now, there are a few possibilities here. There is a version of Lex Luthor that is a physical threat for Superman. Certainly not Lex Luthor just as his day-to-day self, but Lex Luthor in a mech suit, which we've certainly seen over the years. It also has kryptonite elements to it that certainly weaken the ability of Clark Kent Superman to be any type of threat to him. I do not believe that's what it is, but we might be seeing actually, and a lot of people are speculating about this right now, is actually David Corenswet playing two roles, playing Superman, but also playing Bizarro Superman. And it would not be the first time that we've seen Bizarro Superman, at least live action, certainly in movies, but not within the small screen, because Superman and Lois, I think it was season 2, I think it was season 2, actually had Bizarro Superman. And they had Bizarro World, and I really like that show. I didn't think they really got the essence of what Bizarro is or what Bizarro World is, but there's a good chance that David Corenswet will be doing double duty and playing both Superman and Bizarro Superman, the big bad villain. Because if it's just Superman versus Lex Luthor doesn't really pose a threat. He's got to have something that demonstrates that physical threat to him, besides just kryptonite or whatever. We've already seen Superman Returns, and that wasn't a very, very good movie at all. Could we see Lex Luthor in the green and purple mech suit thingy? I suppose so, but I don't think so. I think it'll probably end up being bizarro, but it looks like there will be no big like named villain within the Superman casting outside of Lex Luthor, which we shall see how it goes. There are definitely big plans and big expectations on DCU Superman. This will be the beginning, the foundational elements of whatever the DCU is going to be under DC Studios and James Gunn. Hopefully he has not spread himself so thin that he actually can't keep his eye on the prize in Superman, and also keeping all these other productions in line and ready to go. Because once Superman is really, really successful and it makes $1 billion, everything's going to be basically greenlit at the exact same time, and hopefully they're ready to start getting to production and casting and all that kind of stuff. A lot of interesting things going on there. I'm still very skeptical of a James Gunn Superman movie, but I'm certainly wanting and willing to have my mind changed on that. I hope he knocks it out of the park. If you would like more conversations about DC comic book movies, cartoons, Marvel comic book movies, or even the comic books themselves, Thinking Critical Patreon is the place to be. We've got new podcasts going on all week long with all of your favorite guests on the channel like Doc, Aaron Sparrow, 32 Flavors of Nick Weiser, Jim, myself, all the great peeps around the geek sphere talking about all this wonderful stuff every single day on the podcast, Thinking Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description.